Hi, guys. It's Nomi. You are watching the Nomiki show. I am doing a live right now from the Fox News Green Room in Washington, D.C. You may remember yesterday I was in Los Angeles. Air travel got me here to DC, and I will be in New York tomorrow night. So a lot of things have changed in the last couple of days, and I am just giving you guys a heads up while we wait for people to join the chat. That we will be joining. I will be on Fox News at 1 p.m. Eastern talking about Warren dropping out of the race and the Democratic path forward. But here we are. Warren has announced this morning that she is dropping out of the Democratic primary. I don't think that's a surprise. I think even a few weeks ago there were signals after the New Hampshire primary that her campaign staff thought she was going to be getting out of the race pretty soon because they were laying off some staff. Why she stayed in, I think, is a question, but now we have to understand what it means to have a progressive front. Joe Biden, in just a couple of days, since we aired our live show on Tuesday night, in just a couple of days, he has basically looped in all of the Democratic establishment. And I think what's really important for folks to understand is that, okay, on one hand, yes, he is pulling in a lot of Democratic establishment support after his unexpected, of course it was expected, his win in South Carolina. He had barely any money before South Carolina just, 5 days ago. He was really struggling with bringing in other centrists because they didn't think he could make it. They didn't think he could win. I don't know why South Carolina was necessarily that signal that he could win, but we have to keep in mind that it took 3 or 4 centrists to drop out for other people to come up and endorse, and that is a signal that this guy is not the strongest candidate. This is not a Hillary Clinton situation. There were several centrists, and if they thought he was such a strong candidate, they probably all would have backed him in the beginning. But the second thing to keep in mind here is he really needs to have all these establishment electeds endorsing him to have momentum, because he doesn't have it on the ground. He doesn't have an organization on the ground. And the support that he's bringing in right now, that was maybe Bloomberg's support or Pete Buttigieg's support or Amy Klobuchar's support, it's weak support. If they could so quickly in the final days before the Super Tuesday support Joe Biden, that means that, many of them could possibly vote for Trump or could possibly vote for Bernie. We need to understand those numbers a little bit more. We still don't, because every state has a different electoral process, as you know. We still don't even have a good assessment of the California numbers. But what I will say about Elizabeth Warren's supporters is that I think the majority of them should be brought into the progressive front. Even if they're not necessarily progressive, I think that if it is laid out to them that Joe Biden's policies of the 90s and Richard Goodstein, am I going on with you, Richard? No. We're not debating?
No, I'm debating over Schumer's comments.
Oh, over Schumer's comments. I'm just going to highlight Richard Goodstein here. You may know him from Hill TV, you were on with Crystal Ball today, right?
I was.
You were? Okay.
Already getting the emails because I was on as a Hillary person. So I'm already getting.
Yeah, I remember we used to debate back then, but we're not debating, so I'm not giving away my secrets right now. I'm just kidding.
No.
See, this is the kind of fun stuff that happens in the green room at Fox News. I guess I should put the signs back there. But really, I mean, what we have to keep in mind here is that, Warren's supporters, I believe, no matter how progressive they are on economics or if they're willing to support Bernie Sanders, they're not people who can take racist policies. And Joe Biden's record, whether it was supporting welfare reform, whether it was discriminatory housing laws, whether it was siding with credit card companies that had restricted credit access to people who are poor. And as Reverend Barber said yesterday on Democracy Now!, we have to start talking about poverty because the majority of people who are in poverty in America are people of color. And we have to start talking about these economic policies because they are interrelated and they are intersectional. And of course, the drug laws. We can't forget the drug laws that Joe Biden supported in the 90s and continued to, whether it was private prisons just a couple of years years ago. I mean, it really took Barack Obama to fight the private prisons, but that was not a Joe Biden policy. So, this is what we should be discussing to put pressure on, in a nice, inclusive way, on the Warren supporters who might be on the fence. And I don't think there's a lot of them. I think this is why Warren really should unite with Bernie Sanders. I think it's in her best interest. Progressives, even Bernie Sanders progressives, helped get her elected the first time around. People who advocated for Bernie to run for president were the same people, literally the same exact people, who organized for Warren to run in 2016. And when she decided not to, that's when they started to recruit Bernie Sanders and people for Bernie, etc. So, I think when we start to frame what it means to have Biden as the leader of the Democratic Party, when we start to discuss the real policy issues, and we drill down even more and say this is a multiracial, Bernie Sanders is a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-geographical, meaning rural and city voters. That is his movement. And while Biden does have older voters, much older than actually the Hillary demographic, which should be worrisome to him because things are much closer than they were in 2016, and we still went into a brokered convention, and that was with superdelegates lining up for her well in advance. What I told you guys last week was that it would take all of the candidates, all of their delegates, their support and a brokered convention, and then all of the superdelegates to defeat Bernie. Well, all of the candidates, except for Elizabeth Warren right now, have supported Joe Biden. It doesn't mean that all of their support is going to go to Joe Biden. It meant a lot in many states that Bernie wasn't going to perform well in, but I think Minnesota was not a great result. I think that Massachusetts was not a great result, and it was closer in Texas in the last couple of polls, but the reality is Bernie's movement in Texas really started to grow in the final days. And frankly, he did very well because of Latinos. And so we have to reiterate that this is a multiracial movement. You have Latino support that is extremely strong, and the Democratic Party has been saying the last couple of cycles that, Arizona, New Mexico, of course, Nevada, and Texas are really the forefront of the country right now. And if we want to fight the racist policies at the border, if we want to fight, for the children who've been put in cages and separated from their families, then we should be siding with the candidate who was not part of the deporter-in-chief administration. And I know that's really hard to say, so we have to be very cautious about how we put that out there. But at the end of the day, if you want to have an inclusive country, if you want to protect these children at the border, then of course Bernie Sanders, his policies are in that camp, and I think Elizabeth Warren as well. So we welcome the Elizabeth Warren supporters who cannot see Joe Biden's racist policies in the White House, and really they're not diametrically. Joe Biden's policies, platform backing really is not diametrically opposite to Trump, and so that is the real risk here, is that you end up having a candidate who has weak support on the ground, who has weak support at the polls, actually, if they were so flippant in the last couple of days, and really doesn't have the policies that are going to be so clear to the electorate on election day. And so if we want to keep this movement growing, we need to understand that it's going to be through the policies, specifically the policies around racial discrimination. That is what I think is going to bring over those Warren supporters. I love you all. I'm going to be going on very soon. We are watching the TV right now as Elizabeth Warren is there. If you can see right there, she's sitting out there. I mean, they're waiting for her to come out of her door, I believe of her house, but I'm not sure. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Yeah, it's her house. So check me out live on Fox News, and keep in mind his record, Biden's record, is not good for people of color, and we have to reiterate that because we need to keep this progressive front strong. All right, thanks, guys.